Happenings podcast is brought to you by Sustainable HR PEO and Colath CPA, a local professional service firm supporting Madison businesses and nonprofits just like DMI with their various back of office needs. The firm aims to provide high quality professional services and be true business partners to small and mid-market employers. If you're interested in accounting, tax advisory, HR, payroll, and benefits administration, Sustainable HR PEO and Colath are local providers who are committed to serving Madison and the downtown community. Welcome, everyone, to the Downtown Madison Happenings podcast, where DMI discusses important issues to our members and gets information out about what's happening in our city. We are excited to welcome some excellent leaders on a very important topic here today. We have the folks from the Community Immigration Law Center, also known as CILC, joining us to talk about immigration and several other important legal topics of the day. It's really my pleasure to welcome first Isa Olivares, the managing attorney for CILC. Isa, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you, Jason, and good morning.
It's good to see you. We also have the president of the board of directors of CILC, Grant Sovereign. Grant, how's it going?
We're doing good. It's nice to have a mission in a world that sometimes seems like there is a lot going on and you don't know what to do. So even though there are a lot of things happening, I feel like we got a mission to talk about today. So I'm excited.
Well, perfect segue. That's that first question. What is the mission and what are the objectives of the Community Immigration Law Center?
It's really developed a little bit over time. We started 15 years ago as a way just to get information, legal information to people about immigration, anybody, employers, family, people you go to school with, maybe for yourself. And so we still have a clinic every other Friday where we give people legal information. Those are all volunteer immigration lawyers. But back in 2016, 2017, we realized we probably had to do more when we first hired Isa to be the first lawyer. Now there are 5 lawyers and a paralegal. And we started 2 more programs. One of them is a clinic for people who are applying for asylum. There's so many hundreds and hundreds of people who need to apply for asylum in our community that there just aren't enough lawyers to help them. So we have them come in and we help them to file their own applications. But really, the heart and soul of what we do now is making sure that people who are accused of being deportable actually get legal representation. And with all that's happening in the world right now, it's becoming extremely important. But, it sounds like, focusing on the outcomes, but really what we're about is just making sure that our legal system applies to everybody in our community. I think a lot of people think, there's a good list and there's a bad list in immigration. And if you're on the bad list, the government knows who you are, you should be deported. It's just an easy thing. But in fact, it's way more complicated than that. There was a study done in New York where a lot of people were accused of being deportable. They end up in immigration court, and 96% of them got deported, which sort of fulfills that story that there's a good list and a bad list. But what they did was that community, the city council of New York, gave $10 million to an organization like CILC. They gave a lawyer to everybody who was in immigration court. And lo and behold, 2 years later, their study showed that 48% of the people had some sort of success in immigration court, which blew us all away because it made us think, half of people who were being deported shouldn't have been. And not because the lawyers were like getting around the law or coming up with some sort of loophole, or it was just that the law had not been applied to them because they didn't speak the language, they didn't know our complicated system, whatever it was. So it made a huge difference. But that was the second part we learned, was that at a place like Madison, we could do something when it felt like, there wasn't anything any of us could do about a national issue. And that was when Madison became the second city in America after New York to have a public defender system for immigrants, again, just to make sure people have lawyers in the system to walk them through. And success looks a lot of different ways, but just at least having someone to tell you what's happening, to defend you in front of a prosecutor who really knows what you're doing. And now we've built up this great bunch of lawyers led by Isa who are representing people and making a huge difference here in Madison.
It's a big mission and I'm sure there is a lot of work. Would love to know exactly what that work is, right? What legal services are you providing, Isa, and what communities are you serving?
Sure. So our programming really has grown over the years with the need that exists here in Madison, Dane County, and really all of Wisconsin. We try to not limit ourselves here. We see people from all around the state, but our concentration, the people that we do serve, is local. And so we have for example, today's a Friday. We are seeing asylum seekers this morning, doing consultations with them, helping them to prepare their asylum applications. In the afternoon, we have people from the larger community who have appointments to meet with our volunteer attorneys. And so we set up a network with attorneys who volunteer with us, who spend their time here on Friday afternoon sitting with people to give them good information on how to move forward with their immigration case. And so we are so grateful for our volunteers that allow us to see over 500 people a year and give them good advice in a time when it's so easy to be vulnerable and scammed and get bad information that actually puts you at risk in the system. And so we're really excited to be able to continue to offer that program, which is the program that CILC was founded through. Was that initial clinic program where people could come in and get free legal consultations. And again, about 500 people a year. And we've seen people from over 165 different countries here at CILC. And so really excited to continue to do that work. We have 2 new fellows through the Immigrant Justice Corps that are focusing on children who are at risk of deportation and representing them in immigration court, and adults at risk of deportation who are detained here in Wisconsin. And so we have these 2 new fellows who have excellent supervisors on our legal team who are, really stepping in, doing outreach in the community and identifying the people who need this assistance and making sure that they do a great job. They're 6 months into their first legal career, and we're so excited to have them start this work here in Madison, Wisconsin, to provide this legal service that is of utmost importance. We know, like Grant said, people are 10 times more likely to be successful in immigration court defending themselves against deportation if they have a lawyer with them. And what many people do not know is that children are also part of this process. Children are expected to represent themselves if they cannot afford an attorney. And so this program allows us to make sure that people have a lawyer when they're at risk of deportation, within our capacity, of course. We wish we could help every single person in the state of Wisconsin who is at risk of deportation, but unfortunately, we're a small team, but we're working to grow that right now. I believe that the statistic is that there's about 29,000 people living in Madison that are potentially at risk of deportation. Our small team couldn't handle that capacity, but part of our work is to educate the community about what is going on, what our mission is, what we're doing to hopefully be able to chip away at this unjust legal system and apply the law as it should be.
You talked about the great need, right? 29,000 folks just in the Madison area alone. How do people get connected to CILC, and how are you able to offer those opportunities and those services to folks in our community?
Because we have such a small team, we do direct people over to our website. We also have a phone line where they can call in, and we can have our paralegal screen them and decide and see whether we have a program that fits their needs. Otherwise, we might refer them to another program that could serve them. And so people should call in 608-640-4444 or visit our website, www.cilcmadison.org. That gives more information about our programming, how to reach out to us. If you are a social service provider or an employer that you think you have somebody who might qualify for this, reaching out to us as well in those ways. We always will do an intake, set up people for consultation so they know exactly what they're getting into and have information about whether they might qualify for our programming.
And you all have excellent partnerships with many community organizations throughout our community, including the Centro Hispano. Talk about how important those partnerships are for CILC.
We work a lot with those organizations. Dane County has an Office of Immigration Affairs that does a lot of coordinating and organizing for us. Centro Hispano is, the heart of the immigrant community in Madison, taking people from all sorts of places and making sure they're getting the social services and also the legal services. There's a clinic at the law school who deals with immigration. Catholic Multicultural Center is involved with it, Jewish Social Services. There are lots of organizations together, but right now there's only one organization in all of Western Wisconsin that helps people who are facing deportation or threatened with it. And this is the part I think a lot of people don't understand is, in the criminal context, you get a lawyer assigned to you if you can't afford one. But because immigration is considered civil law, I mean, it barely looks civil because, people come into courtrooms in jumpsuits. They spend time in jail while they're waiting for their immigration court hearings, which are only in Chicago. And they're usually kept in detention facilities in Juneau County, in Dodge County and Juneau. So it looks like criminal proceedings, and it feels a lot like it too, because there are people who have lived in Madison 20, 30 years who may have had some sort of a connection with law enforcement at some time, but it wasn't such a big deal. They paid their dues, but then somehow it comes back to them that somebody's saying they're deportable. But if you don't have a lawyer, you will be deported because the government has paid really expert lawyers. And it's not that, they decide on what the real facts are. They're just so good at it when you have nobody. So it's really important for our whole community that people just feel like they can be safe in the community. They can go and report crimes to the police. They can go to the hospital and get care. They can send their kids to school. They can go to their jobs. And a lot of times, we're not talking about even people who could be deported. There are people who look differently, who have accents and sound differently, who are afraid in this current environment. And having a community where we all band together and say, you know what, we want to just make sure that we have a system where some rational law is applied every time, it really makes people feel a lot better. And it sounds like, that's the kind of thing, feelings versus outcomes, but it makes a big difference to have a community like this where we all know that we're supporting each other and that the rule of law is applied. That's what we're mostly about, is just making sure everybody gets a fair shake at our system.
This is certainly an issue that deeply affects downtown, right? With the workforce that's downtown and so many people working in the space downtown. But you've mentioned this, both of you mentioned this. Immigration law is very complex, right? And it's ever changing. And certainly in this current ever-changing and uncertain environment, there are nearly daily changes to what's happening. How do you all keep up with everything that's taking place right now and making sure that you can be the best advocates possible for your clients or your potential clients?
Sure. As you mentioned, Jason, immigration law is complicated and the consequences are dire. Deportation could lead to losing your home, permanent separation from your family members, from the community, and even possibly death in the country that you're removed to. And so that's why this work is so important. It's so life-changing. And it's important that us as attorneys maintain the zealous advocacy and due diligence necessary. And it means that we are constantly in communication with each other and our larger network of volunteer attorneys and the American Immigration Lawyers Association here in Wisconsin to discuss what are the changes that we're seeing locally, that we're seeing on a state level, that we're seeing on a national level. And it means that we're checking in with each other multiple times a day. It also means that we're on top of whether or not something changes from one day to the next. Just last week, we had federal funding pulled from one of our programs on a Tuesday night. But by Friday night, we were back again. And so this ever-changing landscape has really required us to stay in touch with each other, also really be in touch with our community and keeping them informed when it feels like it's right. We don't want to share information that is going to create fear. We don't want to share information that hasn't been fully fleshed out by the federal government's announcement yet. But we do want to make sure that people feel like they're informed, like they know their rights, so that people can continue to feel safe in our community and experience safety in our community, because I know that Madison is a safe place. And I know that Madison is a great place to be and a great place to live. And we want to be part of what makes that experience of safety.
And what's really amazing is, it seems like it's all about an individual's legal rights. And you can imagine what it's like to have that fear. But Aisa has a whole bunch of great statistics about the economic impact and the social impact that happens in the community. Maybe you could share that too, Aisa.
Yeah, definitely. I think keeping business owners and employees on the job, keeping kids at home with their parents, keeping communities together, it helps to promote economic prosperity. And so when we think about the work that we do, we think about this economic prosperity, right? And we know that creating these kinds of programs expanding these kinds of programs that can put lawyers in courtrooms with people are going to bring economic prosperity to our local economy. In New York State alone, I think that the statistic was that 8.4 billion is the estimated net benefit of having this public defender program because it enabled 53,000 New Yorkers to remain in their communities. And so, huge economic impact of being able to, again, apply the law as it is, keeping people in our communities, keeping them safe, and keeping families together.
Obviously, there's a lot of pressing needs right now. What are the most pressing needs facing with immigration issues that you're seeing in Madison today?
It's one of those kinds of things that it's a really good value prospect, what we're talking about, because of the impact. But there's actually an ROI that you can really count on here. Because we know about the results of just getting a lawyer, we are raising money to make sure that we have enough lawyers to represent people. Because of the studies that we've been doing, and there are 23 other communities now in the United States that have public defender services like Madison. And so we put all of our data into one place and they keep track of it. So we know, like, for example, it probably costs around $5,000 to have one of our lawyers represent someone all the way through the deportation proceedings. It probably costs triple that or quadruple that to have a private lawyer do that. But we know that every time we represent two families, one of them ends up having some real success after having been through immigration court. And a lot of people say, how does that even happen? Because this good list, bad list thing. But there are a whole bunch of situations where it turns out someone is not deportable, but the judge didn't know about it. The prosecutors didn't know about it. And if you don't have a lawyer, you don't know about it yourself. And then there are some people, even if they're deportable, there are laws that say we're not going to deport you. Say, for example, if you've been here for a really long time and you have U.S. citizen family members who would face extremely unusual hardship without your support, you could end up staying. There are people like Aisa mentioned who would face persecution in their home country if they got sent back there. Those people can get asylum in immigration court. So every time we represent two families, one of them ends up with real success. The other one, the law might be applied, they might be deported, but at least they have someone with them to walk through the process, explain what it is, have some dignity, be able to plan for the economic and family outcomes when that happens. So we are really about trying to make sure there are enough lawyers to represent everybody who comes up in removal proceedings in Madison. So we have county and city participation in that. That's why we're a public defender service. We've been in the budget for a number of years for the county and city. The budgets have gotten really tight lately. And that's one area is people can say, this is important to our community and we want to keep going with this investment and maybe even increase it because we know what's coming down the pike now. So, leaders in the community and just us regular residents should probably tell our supervisors and alders that this is an important part of our community and that we really have to keep it going. We do have other volunteer opportunities, especially for people who speak other languages. They can come and help out at our clinics. There are opportunities to help drive people because a lot of times if you're in immigration court, you might not have a driver's license while you're waiting to find out if you're deportable or if you get to stay under one of these programs. And so we have programs where people drive folks to interviews at the immigration court in Milwaukee, or the immigration court in Chicago, or interviews in Milwaukee. So there are a lot of those kinds of opportunities, but mostly it's about getting the word out to make sure that, our community supports it.
You all have very difficult jobs, particularly, now in particular, but always have. What makes you so passionate about the work that you're both doing?
I like how Grant and I looked at each other like, who's going to go first? I think for me, I was raised, in a small community on the border, and came from parents who were very involved in social justice issues, who were born to immigrant parents. And we saw the deep and the stark difference between where I lived in McAllen, Texas, and then just 10 miles south on the other side of the southern border. And wanting to keep, families reunified is part of what my mission is. I started my career as a teacher, and I started to see many families being separated due to deportation when I was doing this work in South Austin. And I felt very strongly about keeping families together, about keeping the fabric of our community strong. And I decided to go to law school and do this work. And so in these times when it becomes especially difficult, I look to the people beside me in my community, the people who have helped to support me, my children, my husband. We are all in this together. We know that liberation comes in solidarity with each other. And I wanted to be a part of that mission. I wanted to continue to be a part of a mission that keeps a community and experiencing safety and togetherness.
There's not much more that can be said after that. We're so lucky to have lawyers like Aissa and people who are committed, who come and live in Madison. Maybe they go to school here and stay here. They get a job and stay here. But it's an intentional community where people come here. They want to live here. They want to do good things like this. But what we really need to do is just make sure that people have a fair shake. We have laws. We can all vote one way or the other about those laws and our representatives, but we have to, at the very least, make sure that people get a fair shake and get someone to walk them through our very complicated process. So trying to uphold, what we say in our country about due process and what we live, I think, in Madison and Dane County and Wisconsin about making sure that we listen to people's stories and that they get heard. And that will happen through this legal process if it's allowed to happen. I think right now, today, people feel like there might not be a legal process. We just read about things, hear about things in the news. And to have a community resource like Aissa and her lawyers to do this is a blessing because it's the way we want to live. And we know that we can do that here. You hear about the terrible things, but we know that to keep CILC going is a way to make a huge difference for our people on this really national issue.
We cannot thank you enough for all the work that you're doing for our community. Organization is so important to the vibrancy, to everything, to keeping families connected, to keeping the economics going in our community. There's so many things that Aissa and the team, so clearly said the importance of this work. As a former attorney, I just want to say thank you because I think everybody deserves zealous representation, no matter what the issue. And you all are doing that on a daily basis and in a time that is very confusing and very hard for many people. So thank you. Thank you for your work. We are so thankful, Aissa and Grant, the team at the Community Immigration Law Center for all you do. We absolutely appreciate it. And please, as DMI members, hope you can get involved, just as Grant and Aissa said you could, in the organization to make sure that their work is sustained and can keep moving forward. So Grant and Aissa, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening to the Downtown Happenings podcast. We'll see you downtown sometime soon. And thank you all for your support of DMI and Downtown. Have a great day.